The following presentation was taken from the 2015 Angel Capital Association Summit. This presentation is focused on positioning life science companies for accurate valuation and a strong exit. A critical component of ensuring accurate valuation and a strong exit is making sure that the objectives and concerns of the customers, the investors, and the acquirers are aligned. Alignment requires planning, and a poorly planned and provisioned journey increases the probability of failure. Navigating your journey requires a map. These navigational instruments ascertain position and direction to your destination. A long journey has many pausing points. Waypoints are planned milestones to reprovision and capture value. Planning and provisioning are aided through the use of tools. Let's talk about a framework to provide you with that. Using a 4-step framework, we start with benchmarking so that we can obtain a standard of comparison for our plan. Tools help us uncover additional specific pieces of information to arrive at knowledge. Let's start with benchmarking to uncover our standard. A successful startup company must align their customer, investor, and acquirer objectives and address their concerns. This grid ensures that the gathering of objectives and concerns are aligned. Let's look at the details. The healthcare payer and providers are interested in improving healthcare outcomes. They do this by increasing accessibility to care while improving the quality of that care while simultaneously reducing its absolute cost. Their concerns in their environment is that with reduced healthcare per event, how can they continue to uncover opportunities for accretive revenue and uncover methods to obtain top-tier operating margins while capturing regional market share? Next, we turn to the investor. Their objectives are regarding return on investment and the amount of money they need to place in a specific investment. Their concerns about the balancing of their personal portfolios and the timing of their individual exits. They want to know that the business model has been validated in addition to the product category. They're also concerned about the amount of capital needed. If venture capital is required, do they have the ability to participate in later rounds? And should public financing be an exit scenario, what's the implications to them? The acquirer's objective is concerned with the acquisition positively impacting their stock price. In terms of concerns, they want to make sure that the acquirer's business model matches theirs. The company's goal is to defend and expand existing market categories and enter new markets. In an environment of healthcare reform, size matters, and the acquirer wants to make sure that they are competitive enough to participate in formulary competitive bids. As the acquirers are constantly desirous for improving or maintaining their financial ratios, leveraging their existing infrastructure, particularly Salesforce leverage, is attractive with an acquisition. Utilizing tools, we can improve the accuracy of our valuation and thus improve a strong exit. Tools reveal standards to help you plot a winning strategy. Let's look at 4 tools that can help you reveal your standards so you can plot a winning strategy. And let's start with valuation milestones. Every startup company is quick to point out that the last company in their category sold for $500 million, but they seldom share that the other 80 or 90% of the companies in that category either failed or had a more humble exit. Knowledge of valuation milestones helps startup companies realistically value themselves and understand the cost and timing of their journey. Knowledge of valuation standards helps define your waypoints. Each life sciences vertical differs in their standards. Sometimes product categories and regulatory categories can also differ. Let's take a look at a medical device example, one that has the category of PMA. Every few years, the Pittsburgh Life Sciences Greenhouse downloads numerous data points from VentureSource and PitchBook. Our objective by specialty area is to understand each category, such as medical devices and pharmaceuticals, to understand the pre-money, capital raise, post-money, and timing of each round. Before you here is an example of the medical devices industry. Let's look a little closer at Series A and B. In addition to understanding the monies, the plus or minus sign represents the range of the standard deviation. The standard deviation representing the dispersion of the set of data values. For example, a Series B post-money is $12 million, but the standard deviation is plus or minus $4.3 million. Now let's pause to define the difference between a fundable milestone and a value milestone. A value milestone increases the value of the company. A fundable milestone also increases the value of the company. However, it also may be the entry point to the next class of investor. For example, moving from an angel to a seed venture capitalist may be important to the success and survival of your company. Items circled in blue may be fundable milestones. Fundable milestones are particularly important when there's a need to get to that next class. For without hitting that fundable milestone, you cannot get the aid of the funding of the next class of investor. Here in Series C, we see the value of regulatory trial approval in the U.S. In Series D, we see the accretive value of regulatory approval and the ability to have U.S. revenue. Depending on the acquirer's industry life cycle, there's a moment when early exits are not practical and one must demonstrate significant revenue and attain cash flow positive. This dataset was based upon 2011 venture data and goes back 5 years to 2007. During this period, the average capital raised for a PMA company was $54 million plus or minus $15 million. It took 72 months or 6 years plus or minus 2 years to average at an exit of $107 million, providing a 2.2 multiple or almost a 15% compounded annual growth rate plus or minus 7.6%. Returning to our tool list, acquirers seldom acquire incremental improvement, and thus one needs to discern they are truly investing in an innovation. How do you know? In life sciences and medtech, a disease state fact book can help us discern innovation from incremental improvement. There are 15 steps to translate disease from prevalence to market dollars. Prevalence is a portion of the population found to have a specific disease. We have a new disease called incidence, an old disease called recurring. Together they derive total diagnosed. From there we can determine the diagnosis rate of the population. There are numerous procedural approaches to diagnose and treat disease, and those can be seen in rows 8 and 9. Our calculations conclude with the number of procedures or services in row 10. Finally, procedures have numerous products associated with them, row 11. These procedures may use more than one unit, row 12. Multiplying total units, row 13, by average revenue per event, we conclude with row 15, market dollars. The red circles on percentage recurring, diagnosis rate, percentage procedures, and units per procedure are all areas which influence the size of the entire market. For example, a 4% change in diagnosis rate can increase the market by 11%. In the next example, a switch in the interventional procedures from 12.3% of all procedures to 13.5% increases the market dollars by 10%. The value of this analysis is that you understand how acquirers may view the market. The factors that increase overall market value in green increase the value for all. There's a saying that all tides rise all boats. Those not in green, the other factors, are generally fighting bigger companies for their share, a share they are not going to give up without a fight. Returning to our tools list, industry lifecycle puts another perspective on the incumbent's battle. Each industry and each product within the industry has a life cycle. Let's use a non-life sciences example here. Wang Laboratories developed the CRT word processor. Between 1979 and 1984, the company's revenue grew 61% annually. In our example, the company was clearly in a growth phase in the market. It should be no surprise to us in such a phase, the company would be very reluctant to acquire a next-generational product that proposes to obsolete something that's growing at 61% per year. Startup companies are cautioned to watch industry life cycles. The phrase "the right product at the wrong time" expresses a situation when a next-generational technology is not well received due to an industry life cycle situation. So how do you get a hint of the industry's readiness? Macro and micro maps are helpful. A macro map lists all the companies in the broader market. For example, what major market areas must a company have to compete in the broader market? If one sees just a few companies in each market vertical, it's a sure sign that the market is maturing. A micro map looks similar, but it looks for signs of a product category level. Correspondingly, if one sees few products in a category, it's a sure sign that the market is maturing. A new product seen unfavorably in a growth market may be welcomed with open arms in a mature market. Once you know the industry life cycle and that acquirers will buy, the next question is, when will they buy? Using the same valuation database we used earlier, we can analyze exits. In our example here, 62% of medical device PMAs are acquired after regulatory approval. Certainly there may be a 38% opportunity you can exit early, but what's the cost to your investors for falling short on cash and planning for the statistically improbable? To create value, the startup company must know they're solving an important problem, and that solution must be important to the customer, investor, and acquirer. One must identify all constituency measures of success. One must define their fundable milestones and their value milestone waypoints. One must determine that the solution is an innovation and that the industry is ready to receive that innovation. Finally, know when your buyers buy. To plan for the improbable is to plan for failure.